Speaking of which, there's sort of an exhaustion, a war exhaustion in this country, of course, and Afghanistan has moved to the forefront of the president's agenda. His commanders have asked for more troops, or likely to ask for more troops. There's some sense that this is going to take some time, but you have resistance in Congress. You have among the American people sort of an exhaustion and a growing opposition to the war. Speak to Afghanistan and how you see that playing out, because you faced very similar domestic politics on Iraq.
Yes, absolutely. And well, we have to remember that the last time we left Afghanistan, after we had helped the Afghans overthrow Soviet power at the end of the 1980s, when we left Afghanistan and when we abandoned Pakistan, that territory became the very territory on which Al-Qaeda trained and attacked us on September 11th. And so our national security interests are very much tied up in not letting Afghanistan fail again and become a safe haven for terrorists. It's that simple. If you want another terrorist attack in the United States, abandon Afghanistan. Now, I do think that we need to look carefully at what our goals are in Afghanistan. This is an incredibly poor country. When you fly over Afghanistan, across those mountains between Afghanistan and Pakistan, you realize that these people were bequeathed essentially dirt and high mountains. It's, depending on how you count it, the 5th poorest country in the world. The others are in sub-Saharan Africa. It has no road network. It has very little electricity outside of the capital. And yet, these are tough people that are struggling to make a more decent and better life. Yes, the Karzai government has its problems, but these are brave people. And I hope that we don't lose patience. I don't know what the recommendation will be to the president on troop levels. I know he will listen to his commanders and make the decision on that basis. And my colleague Bob Gates is a terrific Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, and he will make the right decisions. But if we lose patience as a country, we're going to pay for it. Sometimes it takes a very long time. We stood vigilant with Europe for 40 years to stand off Joseph Stalin and successive Soviet leaders. 40 years. And I was lucky. I was the White House Soviet specialist at the end of the Cold War. And frankly, it doesn't get better than that. You know, you get to see the unification of Germany and the liberation of Eastern Europe. But that was because of tough decisions that were taken in 1946 and 1947 and 1948, and because we stood fast. We know how to do it. We cannot lose patience. This time we'll pay as a country if we lose patience.
Going back to, you mentioned the Soviet Union. Russia, of course, was your passion, your academic passion. There's a lot of investors I hear out in the audience, I think both in Russia and China, I wanted to throw into this mix. Could you speak to those two countries and what the developments there and what concerns you most?
Well, with Russia, which is a country and a culture that I love very much, my concern is that what had begun as an effort to just stabilize the country after the horrors of the 90s. The 90s were, from the point of view of Russians, chaotic. It was a time of deprivation. It was a time of humiliation at the end of the Cold War. We saw it as the great golden age after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Russians didn't see it that way. And so Vladimir Putin came and he helped to stabilize the country. But I'm afraid that it's begun to swing now, or it has begun to swing, to really authoritarianism. And that is infecting the economy as well. A kind of Russia Inc., where slowly but surely politics and economics are mixed in ways that make it difficult to have a secure and predictable business environment, where rule of law and contracts are really respected. It started in the oil and gas sector, but slowly but surely it's begun to infect other parts of the economy. And so business decisions in Russia are not easy. I would be the first to say there are good business opportunities in Russia, but one has to be careful of the sectors, one has to be careful of how long it takes the investment to pay off, because I don't believe that domestic politics in Russia are going in a good direction. When we turn to China, obviously the Chinese economic miracle is something to behold. And yet, if you go outside of the cities, I was in Chengdu during the earthquake, after the earthquake, and you go just a little bit outside the cities, those villages look like something from the 19th century. And so China has a lot of work to do to equalize the benefits of its economic growth. And as that rapid social and economic change has taken place, I think that the pressures on this very rigid political system are growing. You see it in the 70,000 reported riots a couple of years ago in China. You see it in the product safety problems that are emerging. You know, the Chinese answer to the product safety problem was to execute the guy in charge of product safety. Now, this isn't a long-term solution. Pretty soon, nobody's going to be in charge of product safety. They have had, of course, the backlash when the schools collapsed in Chengdu, but the party headquarters didn't. And I believe that it is really a part of the problem of the absence of a political system that allows free exchange. Democracies are messy. Indian democracy is an example. Big, messy, 1 billion people. But every few years, somehow they have an election and they turn back their governments. The good thing about democracy is that if things get bad enough, you can throw the bums out. And you can do it peacefully through elections. In a system that is rigid and there isn't a way for the people to petition their government, you're buying trouble. And I'm concerned, not that China will collapse, but I'm concerned that China's political system is under strain from rapid economic and social growth, and somehow they're going to have to find a way to loosen some of the constraints on political activity.
This administration believes in engaging the bad guys as a way to change their behavior, or certainly engaging them more than your administration did. And I think of Iran in particular. Speak to that, your experience.
I don't have any problem with engaging bad guys. You know, we did our share of it with North Koreans and even met once with a couple of times with Iranians. The trouble is, engagement is a tactic, it's not a strategy. And it's not an end in itself. And so you have to ask yourself, to what end are you engaging? And are you, when you go into the room with an adversary, you had better have sticks in your bag as well as carrots in your bag. Particularly, the Iranian regime is vulnerable right now. I don't know whether it's a year from now or 5 years from now, but that regime is done. It has managed to split the clerics. They're warring with each other. When you think that over 70% of that country is under the age of 30, what is now the formative political memory of the people of Tehran? It's what they did to those people in the streets in Tehran. And it's becoming a more brutal regime every day because Ahmadinejad and the Revolutionary Guard is really even pushing whatever moderation there was in that society, and there wasn't much, to the corner. So I fully understand the need to talk to them about their nuclear program. We did, through the context of the 6 parties there, the European 3, Germany, France, Great Britain, Russia, China, and the United States. But if Iran is looking for influence and looking for legitimacy on the cheap by saying we are now a great power in the Middle East, recognize it, that would be a mistake. These talks had better need to be, for the sake of those people in the streets, about the nuclear program. And Iran needs to understand that it can't be a power in the Middle East based on its ability to threaten to have a nuclear weapon and based on its ability to be the central sponsor for terrorism worldwide.
So we've seen some evidence just in the last couple of weeks that they're possibly speeding up the nuclear weapons-grade nuclear program. Right. Do you think that's because the regime does sense that it's in trouble?
I think that it is directly related to the fact that they need something now that puts aside all that happened to them. And we know, I'm a student of international politics, I'm a student of politics, we know that when dictators are in trouble, they try to externalize their policies and make somebody else the enemy. I think there are probably ways to try and deal with the Iranian nuclear program, but the main thing is to get the world really united behind a tough policy toward Iran. Now, I happen to think that it doesn't all have to take place in the Security Council. The Russians and the Chinese are going to continue to have reservations about tough sanctions. But you know, if the Treasury continues, the United States Treasury, continues to list Iranian banks and entities as cooperating with terrorism and cooperating with proliferation, no enterprise in the world will deal with them. And